Sushil, shall we go ahead?
Yes, sir.
So, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining in today. Welcome to the second episode of Intricate Conversations. I am Swapnesh Sebastian, business consultant and trainer, and I'll be your host for today. To know more about me, you can check out the link that I'm going to send on the chat window. And it's time for me to introduce all of you to the speaker, Mr. Sushil Sharma. Sushil is the co-founder and head of Stratadine Private Limited, and he has a wealth of work experience and education qualifications. He's worked at ICICI Bank, Deutsche Bank, BNP Paribas, Bahrain National Insurance Company, just to name a few. He's been involved with the banking, insurance, and the capital market segments. He's an expert in financial services marketing strategy, risk, and compliance. He's been a faculty since 2005 when he co-founded Stratadine. It's of no surprise that Sushil is from the 1991 IIM Bangalore batch as well. A certified chartered accountant, he has many international certifications to his name, and it's a pleasure to have you here, Sushil. And I believe that you're a great presenter and you'll be able to do justice to that statement now. So, Sushil, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I just shared some facts from your LinkedIn profile, but to actually know you, it would be great to tell us something about your journey so far.
Thanks, Swapnesh. I'm one of those three idiots. I didn't belong in banking and finance. I was actually a theater and arts guy through college, but because of the education system, I ended up in banking and finance. I struggled with that for um, 20 odd years. I was a very good salesperson, which I would put down to being a theater person. And if at all, I'm a good trainer, that's only because of theater, which too is what I should have done in the first place. But what's happily happened since 2005 is theater and art have met the boring world of banking and finance, so that we now have a very happy and engaging. So Stratadime is now 15 years old. We've got top-notch American banks operating in India as our clients. We've got a few top Indian companies where we do sales training as well. And the reason all this came together is because banking and finance met art and theater, and that fairly sums me up, I would say. Yeah.
Right. Sushil, we've heard that you've actually written a few books. In fact, you've written so much that you've injured your hands. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, I've written. See, look, the thing is, I've written 2 books. I have 5 in my head, all written. All 5 of them are written. I just need to get down to pushing it out. But you know the hands. So, yep, I injured my hands. I had carpal tunnel syndrome. But that's in the past. I don't have it anymore.
Do you need any surgery for that? For any correction?
That's what they ask you to get done. But I looked up some of those pictures of the surgery on the internet. You see, God made man in a particular way. They cut this thing here, but they can't put it back. So you'll have a whole bunch of bulging nerves in this region if they cut open what God put there. It relieves the stress, and then you don't have the problem anymore, but it ruins how you look. Not that I look great anyway, but you got to preserve what you have. So there are some great yoga mudras completely cure you. So anyone over here, repetitive motion injury, which is from keyboard and mouse, 2 things you have to do. Keep relaxing your fingers every few keystrokes. Don't just continue in the same position. And if you already have carpal tunnel, do this. You hold it close to the chest like this. Stick out your thumb, wrap it, hold it against the fist like this, against your rib cage bottom bone. Similarly, you do a namaste with your thumbs out like this. Press that protrusion of the thumbs like this to your rib cage. Press it hard. Within 2 days, your carpal tunnel will vanish.
Wow.
It's amazing.
That wasn't part of our script. you've given us something additional, value add.
It's amazing. No surgery, no tension, instant relief. And then you keep doing it, it doesn't recur. So, yes, 5 books are in the pipeline, they'll come.
Can you tell us something about the couple of books that you've written? I think the Wings of Wax was a very interesting one.
Wings of Wax, yeah. Wings of Wax is a hit. You know, self published. It was about the American crisis. The crisis happened in September of 2008. It hit full steam. And the book was out in October. And it sold very well. It still has running demand. The other book actually was published by Tata McGraw-Hill. And that was like, wow, so cool. But guess what? Selling product in your own shop, it sells faster and better because of the passion than selling at somebody else's franchise, where for them it's one amongst a million titles. So the second book was on financial services marketing. It brings in my 20 years of selling, broking and insurance and banking on the streets to practice. The first one was on the American crisis.
Right.
Thanks
So
for asking. Swaps, your research is perfect. Thanks for asking.
So just for the audience to recollect the names of the books, the first one is Wings of Wax, right?
Yes.
So that will be typed out on the screen. Wings of Wax.
Wings of Wax is like written like a movie story rather than a book on finance, but it is serious finance, but you won't feel it. Just 150 pages, everything that you want to know about how the economy functioned at that point in time.
Right. This was released in 2007, is that correct?
2008 October. Easy read, very easy read.
I know. The second one, what is the title of the second book once again?
Grab That Wallet.
Grab the Wallet. Okay.
Grab That Wallet is a serious book on financial services marketing.
So thanks for that, Sushil. Now let's get on to the topic. I mean, the topic is a very interesting one. I think a topic that makes sense to everybody in this world in some way or the other, right? Even if you don't accept it. The story of oil or crude oil, correct? And crude oil is also called black gold, and people say that this has more impact in our lives than the actual gold itself.
Yes.
And we've had this oil driving the whole economy in many ways, in many countries as well. Despite having nuclear energy, atomic energy, and all the other forms of electrical energy and all that, it's still an oil-driven economy, isn't it?
It is. It is. A good 100 million barrels of oil are consumed every single day.
100 million barrels.
100 million barrels of oil every single day.
Right. So this was pre-COVID. You're talking about pre-COVID, right?
Pre-COVID, in January of this year, 100 million barrels of oil every day.
But I hear that now we have negative costing or something which is got to do with the cost of oil dropping to such levels that you can't imagine. What is that? Can you tell us something about
that? There was a day when oil became minus $37. Minus 37. That means I'll give you oil and I'll give you $37 a barrel for you to take it off my hands. And that's because abruptly the world closed. So airlines, transportation, all sorts of people stopped using oil. And so it's not something that you can adequately store, right? It's not gold. There's a reason why gold is the hedge commodity of the world. You buy it, you keep it, forget about it. 10 years later, it's the same. But oil, volumes, you've got to keep stuff, right? So on the one side, you've got the pipes gushing. On the other side, you've got storage areas of the world full out because people that were supposed to come and take delivery of their oil didn't show up. So then everybody's like, I don't have place to keep this oil. So can you take it away? So there came that day when there were no takers and then the price went negative. Of course, it's corrected itself since, but minus 37 is, I'll give you oil and I'll pay you for it. It's crazy.
Wow.
Crazy.
That's a nice trade-off. But Sushil, when we met the first time, I think the price of oil was skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Back, it was very, very high, wasn't it?
Yep.
What's the reason for that?
$140. Between 2000 and 2007, the world economy was growing at an insane pace. In fact, even the 99 growth is just a blip. Insane pace, and China is consuming like crazy. $140, that is peak oil price. But shortly after that, the 2008 crisis happened. And in 2010, by the time the world came out of crisis, something else that America had done came into focus, and oil price started to decline quite steeply.
All right. That's a very interesting story. Will you be expanding on that for us?
That sort of leads into my presentation. I just set you up over there to sort of lead into that presentation. I got some very, very interesting facts and figures that I've accumulated over the years to share with you all, which will tell you that evolving story of oil. Plus, here's the deal. Apart from the carpal tunnel syndrome solution, I'm going to give you some formula by which you can just watch oil and predict where it will go.
Wow.
Yep. I'll give you a price range. It won't go beyond that. It won't go below this. Barring these freak events like minus 37, which immediately corrected itself. There's a range. There's a natural price range for oil, which is not about to change for the next 3-5 years. And the deal is that when the formula changes, you call me again, you know. But it won't change for now.
All right. We'll be very interested in knowing that formula.
All right, let's go for it, shall we?
Yes, Sushil.
Okay. If anyone has anything to ask before that.
Yes, we will take questions in the end, Sushil.
Okay.
We will be able to post the questions on the chat window.
Sure.
We'll get started with your presentation now.
Yeah. Are you able to see this?
Yes, we are.
Great. Let me just. Yeah. Are you able to see this?
Yes, Sushil.
As you can see, unlike the price of oil, my picture is fairly the same, unchanged over time. Yeah. Okay, let's go for this. Oil, the big story. Okay. Now, one of the things about oil is this low price will make sure that oil stays with us for some more time. And I'll tell you why. See, this chart over here, excuse me, this chart over here, which shows you the price of oil moving of any commodity, all commodities go through this high, followed by a low, followed by a high, followed by a low. Gold right now is towards that high because when people are afraid, they buy gold. Gold is the safest, considered the safe haven, the safest place to park money. But it will sure as hell come down. This is law of nature, this curve in front of you. Now, in this curve, there is Saudi Arabia, the world's largest supplier of oil. They pump 11 million barrels a day. Then comes that 11 million barrel comes at $16 change is the cost of production. South American oil comes in at $26. US onshore means on land, comes in at $32. In Africa, oil comes in at $45. In US, offshore means like Bombay Eye, just off the mainland in the shallow seas, it's $51.6. And there is US shale gas. That's what I've got to explain to you. The range is between $45 to $65. And Canada, oil sands between $65 to $75. I'm going to share with you some country data as well. But this chart is worth $1 million. What does this chart tell me? This chart tells me that if oil comes as low as 25, the countries of the Middle East will still be making $7 a barrel profit. This also tells me that if oil is as low as $30, Canada can't afford to make oil at 75 and sell it for 30. No business can afford to make oil at a higher price and sell it at a lower price. And the moment oil price goes up, Canada becomes viable to operate. So when oil crosses 65, half of US capacity will, all of US capacity will come online, and so will Canadian capacity come online. And there will be a lot of supply of oil at the higher prices. And that large supply will cool off the price of oil. The moment it goes low, all these guys for whom it is expensive to pump oil, they will stop pumping oil and supply will come down and the price of oil will slowly inch back up. So there is OPEC which agrees on how much oil it will make so that the price will not go too low. But there is economic reality. If it is more expensive to make it in America or Canada, they will simply not make it if the price is low. They will resume making it when the price comes back up. The reason the price will come back up is if Canada and USA cut production, automatically the supply will come down and the price will go up because demand is fairly stable. Now, what did America do? The story of oil begins in the year 1970, well, actually at the turn of the century, when oil was discovered in the Middle East. It's a very interesting story. One of the oldest working oil fields in the world is in Digboy in India. They used to refine the oil, get kerosene, that was the only thing they knew how to take from it, and throw the rest away. They didn't know how to make all the other things, wax and heavy distillate, nothing. Just kerosene and throw the stuff. That from there till 1972, the Americans were paying the Arabs 2 cents a barrel, 1 cent a barrel, half a cent a barrel, and in some cases lavish bathtubs and bathrooms and other property or cars and nothing else. In 1973, it's a very interesting parallel to Indian history. White man taught us English in order to have us as clerks, and we learnt about independence and freedom of thought and the French Revolution, and independence movement gathered momentum with that. Like that, the Sheikh Zamani went to USA and learned, studied somewhere over there, came back, told his boss, why are we giving this stuff away for free? And they changed the price of oil from 2 cents a barrel to $4 a barrel one happy day in 1973. That's called the oil shock, the first oil shock. And that's the first time that the producers of oil took oil in their own hands. Then again in 1979, yes, Swapnish, you.
Very interesting, very interesting. In
1979, they gave it another bump. And then things continued. So after that, America, Arabs, everyone got buddied up and they kept oil in a particular price band. See, everyone who manufactures wants to earn. But if you make it very expensive, people will start shifting to solar energy. So it should be neither too cheap nor too expensive. They managed it like that till 2001. In 2001, after 9/11, America decided that they are going to reduce their dependence on oil. From 1973 till here in 2016, just before Trump came to office, it was banned in the USA to export oil and gas. Not allowed. What did they do in 2001? They came up with new technology for drilling oil. See, I'll give you a simple example. If you put water in a saucer and you want to suck it up with a straw, you cannot do it. There has to be enough depth of water for you to use a straw. Like that, for sucking out oil, the oil well has to have some thickness. Then only you can suck the oil out. They came up with a technology. If the oil layer is thin, the straw will go down, the oil rig drill will go down, then it will turn like this. And then it will suck out the oil. The second technology is shale gas. It's a hard rock under that huge amounts of gas reserve. impossible to break that rock, excepting if you use a chemical which is found in the vegetable called guar, which grows in maximum in Rajasthan. They took that chemical, put it on the rock and other technology, it breaks, and huge amounts of gas. And you know, truck fleets in America are almost entirely running on gas, not on diesel, since 2005-6. Then you find oil price coming down.
Sushil, very interesting. We talk about shale gas. I said shale gas is going to be a game changer in the oil industry and the consumption of oil, production of oil, and so on. How much of it has made an impact on the general consumption of oil and production of oil?
Huge amounts, because that's why you have the 67 billion, $40 oil. How did you come to $25 to $40? All this supply. Two things. So better oil drilling, shale, and then in 2015-16, US removes the law banning the export of oil. America starts exporting oil, and oil normalizes at 40. So that price range which you see, what is Canadian oil? Canadian oil is oil mixed in water and rocks and frozen solid at minus 40. In order to refine that oil, first you have to put it into steam. That ice will melt. The oil will separate. You have to put it through a filter like our tea straining filter, and you will get raw oil, which if you poke your finger in Arabia, you get. By just poking the finger, what you get, there you have to heat, steam, filter. That's why it costs $75. So to exploit Canadian oil sands, oil price has to be more than 75.
On a lighter note, I hope it's not like how people mix water into milk, right, Sushil?
Your car won't run. So this is the game changer that they've done. They've brought huge supplies of oil into the world market, which is not Arab controlled. Okay, so there's huge amount of supply. And now let me share with you. I'll just share with you some country stats, and I'm done. After that, Q&A. Okay,
Right.
so one, you've got a chart which tells you Canada joins supplies at 75. If oil crosses 60, Canada will start pumping. Moment Canada starts pumping, huge supply will come into the market, oil will cool down. Oil price will cool down. At 25, America is out of the picture, Canada is out of the picture, supplies come down, so the prices will start moving up. So it will remain in that 30 to 60 range. Somewhere between 30 and 60.
So is it fair to say, Sushil, that the US and Canada pretty much control this market in some way?
Let me show you who controls the market.
All right, all right.
You have a way of asking just the right thing. Let me show you who controls the market. After all this, they don't control the market, they control the politics of the market. Here's who controls the market. So, you know, on the left hand side in blue are the top producers of oil. 19% of world energy is produced by USA, 12% by Saudi. The difference between America is 19 and Saudi is 12 is America is 19 is more expensive, Saudi is 12 is very cheap. The other difference between America and anyone else is America's consumption is also 20 million barrels, production is 19.5. So if everyone shuts down, America is happy by itself. You will find in this chart no other country has that balance between consumption and production.
Right.
Saudi Arabia is heavily export dependent. Look at China. Very little oil production, but they refine a hell of a lot of oil. So they buy raw and refine it. I'll show you another country which does the opposite. Buys refined and sells raw. So let's look at how oil looks in the world. Can you see this globe moving?
Yes.
Okay. So here's the country, maximum reserves in the world. Venezuela, $300 billion of proven oil, cost of production $20 a barrel, onshore source. Okay, and that production is 12 million a day. And it tells you something about why America keeps getting very agitated about Venezuela. But Venezuela has got a non-diversified economy. If oil goes to 216 barrels a day, can you see there? This chart is super important. There is the cost of production $20. When I made this chart, oil was hovering between 18 and 22. That means below even Venezuela's cost. But for Venezuela's budget to break even, they should earn $216 per barrel. That's what World Bank says. That means they're not able to run their country because they're not earning enough from oil. That's the civil unrest you see in Venezuela. Next country, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has 266 billion. They pump 12 billion. Look at the cost. Marginal cost. That means every additional barrel is $3. Free ride. But look, fiscal break even. They need to earn $86 to balance their budget. This used to be $15 or $20. Arab Spring happened. Lot of Egypt government fell. Libya government fell. The Saudis, in order to preserve their government, they started giving free money to all their people to keep them quiet. That increased their costs. Now their budget balance is only if it is roughly 86. You see, in 2007, oil was 140. In 2009, because of global crisis, it came down. Saudi Arabia increased their expenditure thinking 140 will come back. 140 never came back. That's why you see Mohammed bin Salman diversifying the economy and getting active with the rest of the world, because they cannot be purely oil dependent anymore. Next country is Canada. $90, $75 to $90 is what it costs. But look, 167 billion barrels, which is comparable to Saudi and Middle East countries. But they don't have a oil concentrated economy. So they are not hit, because they also huge producers of wood pulp. They have various other industries, not oil dependent. Iraq, $6, 4 million barrels a day, $140 billion a barrel, and break even $60. So they are also not able to balance their budget. Iran has 4 million. See the cost, only $15. So they make a lot of money from oil. And China will buy from Iran. They don't care about America's politics. They say that Iran needs $194 to balance their budget. That's because they are banned from trading with the rest of the world for various reasons. So they are very oil dependent for income. Russia, one of the large producers, $18 a barrel, 103 billion reserves. But they are also a diversified economy, so oil break-even is irrelevant for them. Look at this small little country, Kuwait, cost only 5. Their total population is only 240,000. 240,000, I think, are living in the 3-kilometer radius of where I'm sitting. That's their population. They have 100 billion barrels of oil. The tragedy of Kuwait is they're not updated their production technology. So they are struggling to keep their oil fields running. $58 a barrel. Then the great United States of America, we already discussed it here plenty. They have only 48 billion, sir. So yes to the clout, but that reserves, they have less gunpowder than the rest of the world. Then comes Nigeria. Tragic story. Exports crude, imports finished product. The opposite of China, which imports crude and exports finished product. They don't have oil fields. China doesn't have oil, but look at the way they run their country. I don't have oil, let me create oil manufacturing capacity. Import crude, process it. Don't pay the other guy, for finished product.
So that's a pretty interesting one because you have the opposite happening there in the two countries, right? Nigeria and
Yeah, Nigeria and China are complete contrast. And India is not in the place where China should be. We are not where Nigeria is, but we are not also where China is. We could have also done the same thing. Okay, I have to import a lot of oil. Let me import only crude and then make more. India is actually not entirely where China is. See, China has become a large percentage of world production. We are just about managing our own house. See, for Nigeria, fiscal break even $144. If oil reaches 144, Nigerian budget will balance. It's a country that, unlike Iraq, unlike Saudi, it's a country that could have a diversified economy very easily. Then comes this Qatar, where natural gas is a bigger story, but this data here is only oil. And they have a fiscal break even 54. Then comes Libya. I don't have data on marginal cost, but that place, the best, highest grade oil in the world are Libyan oil fields. And therefore, because they are high grade at start, they are the lowest cost of production. And that tells you how oil pans out. So this Brazil, marginal player, $16 billion. But that's the 12th country, and with that, we don't look at any more countries, or do we? No, we don't look at any more countries. Right. That's the story of oil. Those are the countries in the world. You really want more on this? I have put this up as a complete video. There's a whole series of some 5 or 6 videos. All the dimensions of oil I have put up. And I'll keep continuing to post on oil there.
That's on YouTube. The link is on YouTube, and it will be posted on the chat window for those who are really interested in oil, for them to go and click those videos and watch them and get and they're very pretty interesting videos as well, with graphics and and a lot of interesting insights coming out in I think 3 minutes and 4 minutes.
I can tell you this: it takes a lot to those charts where I put the country data. It takes simply hours and hours and hours of work to find this information. While we say that we live in the information age, you take any exercise like that, go try find it. Very tough.
Right.
All there for you, my friends. We are more than happy to share it. Have a look.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sushil. Before we go to the Q&A, I'm just going to engage the audience in a small, analysis of their consumption of petrol, diesel, and so on. Right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give a couple of minutes to the audience to type in on the chat window what is the drop in percentage of their oil consumption. Right. So you can make it 20%, 40%, 50%.
Can I refine that? Will you permit me to refine that?
Please, Sushil. Yeah.
So we know that I'm giving you the data now. Okay, I'll set the stage a little bit.
Right.
Just before COVID, the world was consuming 100 million barrels of oil a day.
Right.
Then came 2 months of complete lockdown. No airline, no cars, no trains, no nothing. Right. When the world went to no nothing, what did this 100 million become? Did it become 60 million? Did it become 30 million? Did it become 10 million? Did it remain at 90?
Right.
So everyone will have some idea. Full lockdown, how much the decrease should have been? What do you say? Will we run that?
So, Sushil, are we going to have 4 options, or the audience can just choose?
Let's say, good point here, Swapnesh. Let's say 30% down. Full lockdown would have brought down oil from 100 million to 70. 30% down, 50% down, and 70% down.
So 3 options.
90% down. 4 options.
4 options.
30% down, 50% down, 70% down, 90% down. What do you think? I have an answer also.
Right. We'll wait for the audience to keep typing in their inputs.
Whoever gets the closest answer, I will send them an Amazon gift voucher.
Right. They need to be first as well, right?
Yeah.
So
So what am I seeing there?
on your chat screen, you can see the answers coming in.
Ah, 90% down, 70% down. Varaprasad said 30% down. Akshay Murali said 70% down.
I think Raghava said 70%. He typed it out 7%. By mistake.
50% down, 70% down, 90%. Swapnesh, you tell me when we are good to go from here. Kachi Okezi said 70% down.
20 seconds to go. 20 seconds to go. Audience, please type in your final answers. And Sushil will be gifting parenting. Right? Yeah.
I will transfer whatever is in my bank account.
Really?
Doesn't that tell you how little there is?
Looks like lockdown has taken a toll on you as well.
Kachi looked at me and said, I don't have to ask you how you're doing. You're fat as ever. And he didn't say fat, but that's what he meant.
Right, time's up. Sushil, it's time for you to.
I'm going to pick. Yeah, so here's the. Yep, somebody said something.
Yeah, go on, Sushil.
Here's the really interesting thing. With everything shut down, the daily requirement of oil dropped only by 35%. Varaprasad is the winner.
Wow. Okay, Varaprasad.
The other person who guessed it is Ambika Selvaraj.
Okay.
Nanda Kumar.
Right.
3 people guessed it nearly right. But the world opinion, I ran this poll on a larger scale.
Right.
Please send me the details. Or we will organize what we have to organize between Swaps and me. But I ran this poll with a very broad audience. And I got something really fascinating to share with you on stats. If you go to YouTube and look at the maths, I'll send you the detail. They put a bowl of toffees on the middle in the middle of a road in front of a mall, and asked everyone to guess what's the number. So statistically, the moment you cross 20, you start to get a truer number. They took the average across 100 people. The exact number of jelly beans in the jar was some 1,631, and the average guessed by the group was 1,632. Some people guessed 5, 10, 20, some people guessed 10,000. But as you take a larger poll, the guess number averages out towards the reality. It's fascinating to watch. I'll send you the link later. But here, that's not the case. Here, the average is 60% down. Everybody thinks 60 to 90% down because never went out. So my next piece of research is to find out who's doing the 65% consumption crap. Sorry, consumption. Okay?
Yeah, right. Okay, so now I think the shop floor is open up for questions. Please type in your questions and we will try and answer as many questions as we can. As people are typing in their questions, I have a question for Sushil. Right? This is probably a very childish question, and I've heard this a long time, in my life, where people, especially in India, would say, if only we were rich in oil or we had resources, oil resources, we would have been much stronger than now, or a superpower of the range of China or probably the US. What is your opinion on that, Sushil? I've heard that
the data is very, very clear.
Right.
Argentina is called Argentina because they had huge reserves of silver. They are not rich. Right. It's not having resources that make you rich. It's what you make of them that makes you rich. In India, all the mineral resources of this country are in Bihar, Jharkhand, Assam, and they are not the richest parts of the country. The richest parts of the country are where people are industrious. Same is true of the world. The richest pocket in the world is California. Invention, industry, innovation, creativity. That's what makes nations wealthy. Otherwise, you will be hard put to find a country which actually has huge endowment of natural resources and is rich. I can give you an exception, Norway.
Right.
Norway, the country, is got huge amounts of oil, but let me tell you how they get rich. And you know, I can give you some solid data, maybe not today, maybe some other time, on why rich countries are rich. I'll just share with you 2 minutes on Norway. Norway has huge gas and oil reserves. Okay, Norway is the country that has implemented maximum cleanest energy. They export all the dirty energy and they use only clean energy. And they have developed an incinerator for garbage, which Chennai Corporation should hear of, all Indian corporations should hear of. It takes all the garbage, converts it to energy, and generates clean water. So much so that Norway has started importing garbage from UK and they are processing it in Norway and earning money out of it and getting clean energy while they are selling their oil and gas to India. That is why rich countries are rich. I can give you in each rich country, and Norway's sovereign wealth fund has more than $200 billion saved up.
I'm just trying to connect the amount of garbage we have in India and how much people actually convert that.
How much? You just needed a small unit at every street corner.
Right.
You wouldn't need this coal energy electricity, and you would solve the garbage problem. So Amir Khan came on the Satyamev Jayate program of his. He found an IIT engineer who had done something similar, and he asked him, "Have you shared this with Bombay Municipal Corporation?" He said, "Yes." He said, "What did Bombay Municipal Corporation say?" So that engineer told Amir Khan, "Bombay Municipal Corporation said, we don't have any garbage to give to you to process." Now, anyone who's been to Bombay knows where to find garbage on the road. It's on the road. But they told him, we don't have any garbage for you to process. That's why poor countries are poor.
Wow, that's a controversial statement.
Uh-huh.
Sushil, yeah. Any questions, audience? We're waiting for any questions from the audience. Meanwhile, let me ask Sushil himself. What are the common questions people ask you when you talk about this topic? I mean, what are the things that people
When I talk about oil?
Yes, oil.
Are you sure you want to hear this?
Yes.
What's the difference between the international oil price and what I pay at the pump? That's the single most asked question. I told you. And the answer is, I'll tell you, I mean, I don't have the exact answer because that's one of those research topics that I have lined up. But the broad number is 60% taxes. Every state has its own trip. It's taxes.
Taxes, yeah. Taxes. I have a question here from the audience, Sushil. Is there a direct connection between oil price and coal price? I mean, is that very linear as it is, or is it more complex and just simple?
I mean, there at some level they may be correlated, but fundamentally no, because gold is, when people buy gold, when they panic, they buy gold. Oil is something you buy to consume. It's an item of consumption. Saudi Arabia too does not want oil price to go too high. If it goes too high, you and I will stop using oil. If alternate technologies become more widely prevalent, it will be very damaging. So they don't want it to be too expensive also. So oil, no. Oil is demand supply. Gold is fear.
Right. Okay. I don't know. The current rise in the value of gold is the reason why a lot of it was actually smuggled. I think there's a case going on in India at the moment.
Yeah.
So is that the reason, Sushil, or
What is the case?
a lot of gold has been smuggled to India? So
That always happens. Indians just love gold. I mean, gold. But gold always goes up when there's economic uncertainty, and that's what you're seeing.
so I think with that we have no more questions coming in, but I think a lot of information is available on your YouTube channel, Sushil. Okay? I think it'll be very useful for the audience to actually log on to that and watch those videos and gain more insights. I think this is a very short discussion that we've had, but very enlightening one, I would say. So the link for the YouTube will again be posted on the chat for them to actually access it, right?
Cool.
So
You want me to post it?
no, it'll be done. So Sushil, thank you so much for coming in. It's been a fantastic session. I have one more question. Do we have time for one question? Okay, that's a compliment for you, Sushil. So a lot of people have actually been enriched with knowledge now, and their questions will come in later. That's what they're saying now.
Fair
So,
enough.
So we might have a separate session for that. Okay, another question regarding gold. I'm not sure if it's exactly related to this topic, but a question regarding gold from Jayaprakash. The question is, if gold stores and shops are closed, will the price of gold increase?
The movement in the price of gold. Okay, he's right, Mr. Jayaprakash. You're right. Indians will have purchased huge amounts of gold during Akshaya Tritiya, during upcoming Diwali. That demand will dent the price of gold. But while we are the world's largest consumers of gold, when it comes to economic cycles, the kind of guys who buy and store gold who are not sitting here in India, who are sitting there in New York, and each guy is managing $7 trillion, $5 trillion of customer money, and he is buying gold. That purchase of gold is not ornament gold. It is not even slabs of gold. It is gold certificates, gold futures, gold credit funds. They just park all the money in uncertainty, in trillions, into whichever product they think will run, or safety, whichever way you want to look at it. So India gold is a different story. I mean, for example, most of Indian gold is a one-way street. It will arrive and it will stay. The American funds that put their money into gold, it will arrive. When the economy picks up, it will go into inventing tablets, flexible screens, AI, machine learning. Sell gold, buy innovation. That's what they do on the up. You should go see my chart on 100 years of Dow Jones running up to Corona. I have marked every single event in world economy, how they've invested. Last 10 years chart, if you see, insane. How many things they have developed. Oil is one of them. Oil shale exploration is one innovation. Look at the amount of things they've innovated. You'll be stunned to know most of your trillion-dollar companies in America today did not exist in 2009. They are born after the crisis. Facebook is after the crisis. WhatsApp is after the crisis. Everything is after the crisis. It's a story. It's a story.
All right.
Okay.
So, Sushil, thank you so much.
No end to it, man. No end to it.
Yeah, we probably need another session sometime later to discuss the gold one, I think, and probably.
Is that right? Okay.
It's been an honor to have you, Sushil.
My pleasure, sir.
It has been great to have you here. It's been wonderful and enlightening for us. And we thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as well for joining us today, sharing information. And some of the things that you actually shared is never available on the internet. These are things that you have done your research on, and you've actually, put these things together. And you have a team that works with you as well.
That is correct. We have a large research team. We train the American banks. We train the guys that work for the American banks. So we have to be current. I mean, when I wake up in the morning, I wake up in New York at Indian Standard Time.
Okay. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us.
Thank you.
For the last episode, there were a lot of people who asked about more information regarding artificial intelligence. This was our previous episode, and the speaker was from Maya Systems. So there's an upcoming webinar. If you'd like to join in and find out a little bit more about that, the admin will actually post the link to the upcoming webinar at the Maya Systems. And that's the one last thing I wanted to say. And thank you so much for joining us. Please send in your comments and feedback to the email that is there on your chat window. Audience, thank you so much for staying in with us during the course of the session. Thank you so much, Sushil. Thank you, audience.
Thanks, guys.
Till next time.
Till next
Bye.
time.
Bye. See you then. Take care. Bye.